Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me just say that we get it. Personal development can be hard, but you don't have to do it alone. Project Endure has been on a mission to create a supportive and inspiring community of people, all striving to be better together. Head down to the link in the show notes and join the Hard Things Club so that we can do hard things together. And if you're already a member, invite a friend and spread the love. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 52. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very, very special guest down in North Carolina, Casey Cline. Casey, what's going on?
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing so well. I'm happy now that we're here together having this conversation. For the people listening who don't know who you are or don't know how we know each other, we know each other through Bear Performance Nutrition. And I have to say this right off the bat. I've never called anybody an animal or a beast on the podcast before, but I am going to call you both of those things. And I think people will understand why as we talk about your running. But give the people a little bit of background on who you are, and we'll jump in from there.
So I'm Casey Cline. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is my hometown. For work, I'm a registered landscape architect. And then I have been kind of chasing marathons for the last probably 8 years of my life. And yeah, grew up in North Carolina, went to NC State, and then moved back, kind of for work, and been here ever since.
Awesome. So your day job, you're an architect, and what kind of architect did you say?
I'm a landscape architect. So when I say landscape architect, I will not design your backyard. Basically, we design everything outside of the building footprint. So your public plazas, your streetscapes, your greenways, everything kind of outside that building envelope, which is really exciting when you're a runner and you explore those places all the time.
Yeah. How did you get into that? Because I don't know many architects.
So growing up, my mom was an interior designer. And I grew up kind of going to work with her every once in a while. And I was always into art and drawing. And I'd find the whiteboards like in the office. And before I knew it, those whiteboards were transformed into like these works of art, or at least I thought they were works of art. So I just from an early age, I was introduced kind of to the architecture world and was fascinated by it. And then it just became like a no-brainer. Like that was where I wanted to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, same question, but for running, how did that start for you?
That's a great question. So I remember like being a kid and we used to go to Watauga Lake and we would go on this big family camping trip, but we'd always have a race, like a foot race. And it would be like me, my brother, his friends, and it'd be like, all right, ready, set, go. And I was always fast and could beat some of the boys, not my brother, of course, but yeah. And so that's kind of like where I was like, oh, okay, maybe I could run, and started with middle school track, ran the 400 and the 100, got into high school. My coach asked me to run an 800 and I quit the team because I told him it was too far. Um, so that was kind of like my introduction into running. And then when I got to college, I lived right underneath the track team, which was kind of random. And I met one of my very best friends who was on the track team. I was always inspired. They would go out on these long runs and I would see them. And like one day I just hopped on the treadmill. I'm like, okay, I'm going to run. And I ran like 3 miles and I was like, all right, cool. I ran 3 miles. And then I was like, all right, well, I'll sign up for a 5K. And that's kind of like where it started. But yeah, it's gone a long way since then.
Yeah, I'd say. So, for context for people listening, how many marathons have you run to date?
I got that question the other day, and it's either 15 or 16. Um, One of those is an ultra, so I still count that as a marathon because you go a little bit further. Um, which was a crazy experience because going past 26 when you think that's the finish line was a total mind game. But I think London will be 16 this fall.
Got it. Now, I want you to take all of your humility, and I know you have a lot of it, and just put it to the side for a second. What is your PR in the marathon?
3:16.
And for people listening who aren't familiar with general marathon times, what minute per mile pace does that come out to, roughly?
7:27,
In other
which
words, fast.
it's pretty good. I actually, so at the Go One More Marathon back in January of this year, I started chasing a number that I'd never thought that I would chase before. And that was like 3:20. And then I was like, okay, Casey, you don't want to run 3:20. You really want to run 3:19 because you want to break that barrier. And I finished that race and I ran 3:19, like, I can't remember what it was, 3:19 something. And Jeff Cunningham looks at me and he's like, yeah, you could break three. And I'm like, wait, what? That's never even like, I don't know. It's like the limits you place on yourself. You never know really what they are until like you kind of start to chip away and see like what you're made of, which is kind of a weird thing to think about. But um I never thought that I would be chasing what I'm chasing. Like 3:16 was a good day. It was a fun run. Um because I wanted to run Boston for fun and it was just like a great day. And so now like getting into London training, chasing something faster than that, like I just never thought I would be there. It took me 7 marathons to qualify for Boston, like 7 marathons, like lots of tears, lots of training, years of work. And then I finally qualified and I was like, all right, 3:30, like that's it. And then, you kind of break that barrier for yourself and you're like, all right, well, there's more in the tank. Like, where can we take this?
Yeah, yeah. There's a quote that I have that I want to share. This is early on in the podcast for a quote, but we're going to go for it. It's by Elizabeth George, and she said, "There always comes, I think, a sort of peak in suffering at which you either win over your pain or your pain wins over you, according as to whether you can or cannot call up all that extra ounce of courage that helps you break through the circle of yourself." And that phrase, break through the circle of yourself, really resonated with me and actually really resonates with this part of the conversation. And it's kind of this idea of like we have these limits, like we each have our limits, but it's not until you approach those limits and touch those limits and test those limits and push those limits that you can actually expand that circle. And now you have new limits. And now your new limits are much, much greater than they were previously. And so before we dive too far into the running side of things, I want to open up with this first question, which admittedly, before we hit record, you told me was really hard for you to think about. And so the question is, what is the hardest thing in life that you've had to handle? So a circumstance that you didn't necessarily get to choose. And I would love to hear the thought process behind why this has been such a challenging question for you to consider. I think that would be a cool place to start.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about the hard things in life, and things that I couldn't handle, like I feel like they all kind of like teach you something different, and lead you along this path. And so you kind of like build this like armor of I can handle a little bit more and I can handle a little bit more. And so I think back to like when something was really hard that I had no control over. And I don't think I've ever really told anybody this, but um so I started at UNC Charlotte my freshman year and then transferred to NC State. And I moved in with people that I didn't really know. And I remember being in an apartment with these people that I had just met that had very different views and lifestyles, like really into the partying scene, would bring people back to our apartment where I felt really uncomfortable in certain situations. And almost didn't feel like I was at home inside my own like apartment. And that was such a growing experience because I remember like coming home and calling my mom and having panic attacks and like being like, what is going on? Like, I have no control over this situation. And thinking back to then, it was like really a time where I had to grow. Like, I had to like stand firm in who I was and like what I believed in and like not give into the crowd. And I think that kind of gave me this like grit and this shell of like, even just going to college and just being in this new place where you didn't have somebody to protect you, like you were out there by yourself. And but I think that was really tough of being in the place that you called home and it didn't feel like a home. It felt like you were kind of, you couldn't sleep at night because your environment was different than what you really wanted to be in. And even like now, years later, I am very protective of the environment I keep in. I keep my circle tight. I surround myself with the people that I want to be good influences on me. And I think that's extremely important. So yeah, hard question to answer, but I think too, like life is always going to throw different things at you. And that's kind of when you get resilient and you can either like move forward or you can get taken down by those things. And I just can't put myself to get taken down by them. Like there's got to be a way, and that's when you get kind of creative and you just figure out um just and that happens like in races, that happens in everything, but that's when you just got to get gritty.
Mm. I love the concept of grit. And just to take this back, I also had an experience in college like that. And I would imagine that many people listening to this podcast, they're the type of people in general who want to better themselves, who maybe have values that are not similar to most of the world. They don't necessarily want to be quote unquote normal. And so I really think a lot of people can relate to this kind of concept. How did you endure that year of school? Because that, you have nowhere else to go, right? You're going back to that place every night. What were some of the strategies you used to get through that season?
um yeah, like my faith was obviously a big thing, but and I probably do this now because I don't spend a lot of time at home. I was always out doing things.
Mm,
Like I was like home was a place that I crashed, but if I didn't have to be there, I was always out like being around the people I wanted to be around or joining clubs or going on a run or finding ways and like creative outlets to just be out in the world, which I think's a really healthy thing is just like being out and being engaging in the world and not, living inside your little box. But um, yeah, I think it was, and I don't know if that's an escape or what, but for me at that time, that's kind of what worked. And um, yeah, it's like when you get kind of bogged down by things, the one of the best things I've found is surround yourself by the right people. And a lot of the times, if you're in kind of a sticky place, those people can normally pull you out of it, or at least like shed good lights, things of encouragement. So,
Did you ever feel alone in what you were going through when you were in that season of life where maybe the people who you were living with and the people you were around in your living space didn't share the same values? Did you ever feel isolated in that season?
oh, absolutely, like
Yeah.
all the time. But that's just where I, that's where you just kind of who you are, and I think the world constantly because my faith is a part of who I am and who the Bible says I am. And I think that the world will try to put all of these agendas or things on your life, and you have to really stick to who you are, stick to your core, and don't let other people's ideas or views or things that are not aligned with your core kind of break you down. I just think that's such a big thing. It's that especially in the world of social media where it's like compare and it's easy to see somebody's life and think that it's perfect, but it's also you got to know down to your core like who you are and what you
Mm.
stand for and what your beliefs are and like what you're not going to allow in your life. And that's kind of that's a big thing.
Absolutely. There's one of my favorite quotes is from Friedrich Nietzsche, and he once said, "Those who dance are considered insane by those who can't hear the music."
Yeah.
And it's almost like you were dancing to this music in your head, but everybody else around you had this other music on. And
I told you before we got on this podcast. I was like, I live in this like creative like fantasy world sometimes in my brain because I'm very much like as a designer, I'm very much a creative. So I constantly have to imagine places that I'm creating, right?
mm,
And so I can sit there and come up like I can plan the wedding before the first date. Let me just say that. Uh, but I can just come up with these ideas and I can live in my own little world and I'm pretty happy there sometimes.
yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I would also add that for every person out there, yourself, myself included, during those seasons where you might feel alone, I think it truly does help to understand that there are other people out there dancing to the same music. You just might not know them quite yet, right? You have it looks like a track club, right? That you run with. Is it once a week? Do you run with them?
Yeah, so on the side, I'm a running coach and I lead a track workout that started very organically. I was out there doing my own workouts and actually through Instagram, friends found out about it. And now we have a very stable group of about, 20 people that ebb and flow and come each week. And it's like one of Tuesday, you wouldn't say normally Tuesdays, but Tuesdays are one of my favorite days of the week because I show up and like there's this group of people at 5 a.m. that are there to work hard and like just chase something bigger than themselves and just watching people improve and like come up to me and say, "Oh, I ran this faster," and like let's freaking go. Like that's why we're here.
And I think that's the beautiful part of social media. And it's the beautiful part of the world that we live in, where we can connect with almost anybody anywhere and we can create these communities or choose to be part of these communities, right? Most of the world would look at your run club getting up at 5 a.m. on Tuesdays to suffer in a sense and say that is crazy. But to you guys, and probably to many people listening to this podcast, that sounds awesome. And that's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very rewarding. And you always leave there. I never leave there in a bad mood.
Mm.
Like I could even have a bad workout, but I'm not leaving there in a bad mood because it's just like the environment that you're in, like you've got the endorphins flowing and everybody's there to support everybody. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a really, really beautiful thing. Now, Casey, I think this next part of the conversation is what I've been looking forward to the most because in a selfish kind of way, have a lot of questions for you when it comes to the world of running. But I'm going to lead with this question. What's the hardest thing that you've ever done on purpose, and why have you done that thing?
So I was thinking about this question and it's kind of always that like going into the unknown of the places that you have never been before. And that's a little bit scary, but it's always the most rewarding. And I can think of, I can't pinpoint just like, I, training for a marathon for the first time where you're hitting a milestone each week and you're like, this week I ran 15, this one 16, and you're hitting these new places that you've never been. Um, that's definitely something that's like been extremely rewarding and has made me grow. But I think I did this one workout, and if he listens to this, he's gonna laugh. But my friend Rob put on this secret boot camp workout where he didn't tell you what time of the day you were gonna be there. He would text you in the middle of the night, say, "Show up. You paid for this." And he would put you through these series of workouts. You didn't know whether you were going to run 10 miles. You didn't know if you were going to carry a rock. You didn't know what was going to happen, but you knew you were going to go through this. The workout could last 3 hours, it could last 5 hours. You didn't know what you were signing up for, but you were signing up for something that was outside of your comfort zone.
Mm.
And I remember the first I did it, I can't, 2 or 3 times. And the first time I did it, I broke. Like I broke into tears. I had a panic attack. So we had to do this exercise where we got completely disoriented. And it was something that they do I think it's been called being a sugar cookie, where you have to get wet and then you have to roll around and you have to roll in the sand
Mhm.
and then you have to like do all these other things, but you get completely disoriented where you don't necessarily know where you are and you're kind of out of control and you're kind of out of your body a little bit. And I remember going through this exercise and I just broke. Like I had no more control over the situation I am was in. But I think the biggest thing I learned from that was just to kind of let go.
Mm.
And it was like the first time in my life I had really had to like check check my thoughts and like check like, okay, you are not always in control. Like stop trying to control every single aspect of your life. Like sometimes you have to go with the flow and you have to embrace it and you have to just roll with the punches. And I think that experience, um, it broke me in the best way, to where like I actually worked out with this person this morning and they're one of my very dear friends. And it's just, yeah.
First of all, we got to get Rob on this podcast.
Yes,
Uh,
you do.
so we'll make that connection. We'll make that happen. Second of all, that sounds incredibly intense. And it doesn't surprise me on one level, and it does on another, that people would pay for this experience. But I think it just speaks to the fact that as human beings, we do understand that there is value in discomfort, there is value in struggle. And it's cool that you had that experience. So when you broke, how long did it take you to get back up and keep moving?
I will tell you. So I broke. I had a panic attack. I legitimately had like I was hyperventilating, crying. Um, but I kind of got myself back together somehow.
Mhm.
I don't know how, and just kept going. Um, like after that whole incident, I just kind of got my breath and just kept going. And it was just kind of like that time of like turning your brain off, which happens a lot in a marathon too, is
Mhm.
like when you just kind of just turn off. Like I am in this moment, I am in this, I'm going through everything that I've trained for. But for that whole next day, I sat on my couch probably and just contemplated my life and like what I was like doing with my life and like values and things. And it legitimately broke me in a really weird way, as like of, you know, what am I really in control of? Where like where do I see my life going? It was like one of those very eye-opening experiences where you're just kind of like, all right, let's start to journal, let's start to evaluate what just happened.
Mm. It's been said that the moment of surrender is not when life is over, but when life begins. And it's also been said that peace requires us to surrender our illusion of control. And I think we go through so much of life, and I'm speaking from personal experience, thinking that we can and should control so many things that in reality are just outside of our control. And I think for me, that's where a lot of anxiety comes from. That's where a lot of
Mhm.
worry comes from. That disconnect between I'm afraid of this outcome or I'm afraid of this thing, but in reality, I can't control that.
Yeah.
I'm curious your experience reflecting on that experience, if you've come to similar conclusions.
I mean, I think now I'm very much more kind of go with the flow. Like, I have two examples of, like recently I got stuck in Seattle and my friend goes, how are you so calm and cool? Like, you've been stuck here for 2 days. Like, they kept canceling flights back to Charlotte. And I was like, I don't know. I get to go on an adventure. Like, I got to go climbing today. If I had been back in Charlotte and been at my office, I wouldn't have gotten to go on this extra adventure. And then like a couple months ago, I had a relationship in, and I just like looked at it and I was like, this is God protecting me.
Mm.
Like I, this is everything in your life happens for a reason, and you go through these seasons and you realize that this is something that's supposed to make you grow and just teach you something. And I think if you can view it as everything as like a growth or a teaching, um, you know, you start to view control in a different way, to where it becomes almost like surrender, like to where you say, okay, well, God, where do you want to see my life go? I mean, if this isn't, my plans aren't good enough. Like, let's let all of my plans go, and you start to guide where I'm supposed to go, because it never turns out the way you think it's going to. And that's where you just kind of have to roll with the punches, and trust that, like, you will get exactly where you need to go. And that's like that ultimate like surrender. And that's what I had to do in that moment
Mm.
when I got turned into a sugar cookie and just like lost it. Is like, you had to surrender. You just had to be in it. And I think that's one of the, when you can surrender to the journey that you're on, it's very freeing. And so now when I think about races, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go have fun, because I know I have to surrender to whatever journey I'm going to go on that day. And life's too short not to have fun. So
Mm.
just embrace it and enjoy. Like, don't put too much pressure on it. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. You've put in your hard work, you've put in everything you need to. Go out there and just enjoy it and embrace it, because you only get one life. So chase it.
There's so much there that I would love to dig into. I think first and foremost, just the concept of surrendering outcomes, not putting all of the weight in the end of a race, of a competition, of a pursuit is so important, because you think about it, right? Let's say typical marathon prep. Let's geek out for a second, right? So you're going to prep for a marathon yourself. Ideally, how much time would you like to give yourself for a marathon prep, for good prep?
I like the long game. So I like 16 weeks, which, they say if you're in good shape, you really don't need 16 weeks. But I like training for a marathon. I get really hungover after I run the race. I'm like, hey, what's next? Like, it's so sad. Like, the the post race blues are a real thing.
Yeah. So, and I'm actually in a 16-week prep right now for New York City. Within those 16 weeks, roughly, how many miles are you running?
I like so I've always been a low distance marathoner.
Okay.
Like, I've ran like 35 a week, which sounds really low for a marathon. But now I'm closer to 50. I like 50. I know a lot of people run a lot more than that, but I do a ton of cross training. I still lift. I try to lift heavy,
Mhm.
do CrossFit, and do a lot of like other metabolic conditioning exercises. So therefore, I don't feel like I have to run as many miles. I run quality miles, not quantity miles.
Mm. I like that a lot. So I'm doing some quick math here. So here's my thought process. 16 weeks. Let's say roughly you run 500 miles in those 16 weeks. And let's say in each of those miles, you are taking, let's say on average, 1,000 steps. We're just going to make this super simple. So that's 500,000 steps that you've taken through that 16-week prep. And that's probably on the low side, to be honest. In
Mhm.
that marathon, people see the end result. They see the 26.2 miles that you just ran, and they get to see those last couple steps as you cross the finish line. But that's not the large majority of the work you put in. That's just the icing on the cake to me, right? You put in all that work beforehand that nobody else really gets to see. Sure, maybe you share it on social media, but like it's the process that matters. The product is what it is, but the process is where the magic happens.
And I think a lot of people try to rush the process, because I think they see the process of like one race and they're like, oh, no, but when you can stack fitness, and I tell a lot of my clients this, I'm like, if you can stack fitness, we can go places. Like, that's how you get better, is you become more resilient, you don't get injured, you do all of these things to like keep your body healthy and keep it moving. And I think when you can, like, somebody asked me, well, how do you do CrossFit and how do you run and do all of this? And I'm like, well, it's taken me years to let my body slowly adapt to this training load. It didn't happen overnight. And I got a question the other day, like, how long is it going to take me to get used to running in zone 3? And I said, I don't got the answer for you. I said, it could take 6 months, it could take 3 years, but you have to put in the work. And a lot of the times people don't want to put in the work. Like, I've been running marathons for 9 years and I'm only at 3:16. Like, I say that lightly because it took me a long time to get there.
Mhm.
I had to go through all the blood, sweat, tears, injuries. You know, it didn't happen overnight. And I think that's the thing you got to do is like if you really want to chase something, you got to play the long game.
Mhm.
And that's where we say commit to consistency. It's yeah, you have to commit. You have to be consistently good.
I love it. And it's so true. And the other thing is, I think people get discouraged oftentimes on the bad days, on the hard days, I should say. First of all, I would rather view those days as character building days. I know that might
Mm-hmm.
be cliche, but it's true. It's almost like the stock market. Stock market goes up, stock market comes down. If you invest on the down days, right, quote unquote, buy the dip, that's when you get the most bang for your buck. And I don't
Yeah.
see our lives and our effort any other way. It's the same thing, right? When you wake up and you don't feel motivated and you don't want to do the work, that's when it matters the most. That's when you get the most return on your investment. But people, you're right, it's hard to play the long game. So what
Yeah.
keeps you in the long game?
Um, I think it's just constantly chasing getting 1% better. I don't think it's anything big. I feel like we're called to live a big life and something that's like bigger than ourselves, and we've been blessed with these bodies and we should see what they're capable of. And you know, I just want to find out what I'm made of. And I think that's what running is my greatest teacher. Like running shows me it can break me, it can build me up. It allows me time. I call it friendship activities. Like it allows me time to catch up with friends over long runs. But I think when you think about something as a teacher and something that's like added value to your life, like I figure out my design problems. Um, Running is just like a metaphor for, I mean, as cliche as it sounds, a metaphor for life. And that you're always constantly chasing something bigger than yourself. And if you're not, then what are you like? You kind of you're just existing. And I don't want to just, I'm not called to just exist. I'm called to be fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm called to live and chase something bigger than myself, because that's who God says I am, and I'm very confident in saying that. I For the longest time I felt like the world wanted to put me in this box to say play small,
Mm.
and I don't want to play small.
On a light note, real quick, every now and then when I'm having a tough morning, I usually drink out of a clear glass coffee mug. My wife has a mug that says fearfully and wonderfully made. So if
I
I'm
love
having
it.
a tough morning, I'll usually just grab that one and fill it up. It does the trick. But no, I couldn't agree more with you. And to be honest, Casey, I would love to dive in a little bit more to the concept of living big, of playing big, because I have clients, I have friends, I have people in my life who don't feel like they deserve to play big. They feel like they have no business playing big or being in a space that maybe they would love to be in, but for whatever reason they just don't feel like they should be there. I'm curious what you would say to a friend in your life who came to you kind of with that thought process.
Well, I think first I would want to understand why those thoughts
Mm.
are happening. Um, but then, I think that's a very internal thing where you have to know your worth and you have to look yourself in the mirror and just say, I am chosen, I am worthy. Like I was put here for a reason. And whether you know it or not, you're impacting people's lives every single day. Um, and I think when you start to pay attention, you'll see that the people in your circle are probably looking up to you in some way. And so if you can't see value in that, then I would just like question like what brings you joy,
Mm.
and look yourself in the mirror and realize that you are worthy of that joy. You are worthy of something, a big life. And the only person who you're selling short is yourself. Like nobody else can do that to you. Um, so I'm probably preaching to myself right now, but like, yeah, nobody else. can take ownership of that. And so if you want to change your life, you have to go to bat for yourself every single day. And you have to show up. Like half of the battle in life is just showing up. If you show up, you'll most likely put in the work. But it's just like taking those limiting beliefs and just saying, no, I'm not going to listen to this. It's a non-negotiable. Like I'm not going to sit here and like when you talk about like waking up in the morning and having things that, might tell you, oh, well, I didn't sleep well. I didn't
Mm.
get my 8 hours. Like, no, make it a non negotiable. If there's something you're hungry for, you will chase it. And if you don't chase it, you're not hungry enough.
I've got nothing to add other than a lot of head nodding. Yeah. I mean, well, I'll say this. I'll say this. I think it's easy sometimes to be so consumed with the thoughts in our mind that we forget to look around, and
Mhm.
we do forget to realize that, hey, I do matter. And not in an egotistical kind of way, but yes, the things I do, the way I show up for myself, the way I show up for other people, that matters because it's bigger than me. And,
Yeah,
if I quit on myself, who else out there is going to see that and quit on themselves?
100%. 100%. And when you can start to think outside of, I think the biggest thing, if somebody's having trouble like with certain things in their life, the best thing you can do is get out of yourself, like outside of yourself. Go serve, go find a way to serve other people and see your value in like a different light because you are providing service for normally if we're stuck, we're probably caught in our own head and we're in our own way. And as soon as you can step outside and say, you know what, this is not about me, I'm going to serve other people, you can normally get out of your way because you're serving a purpose bigger than yourself.
Yeah, that's so well said. So well said. Now, to transition a little bit, but to stay on course with the conversation, what does the word endurance mean to you? And I'm really curious to hear your answer because you clearly embody endurance when it comes to running.
Yeah, I love the word endurance. And the thing that I think about is a question that I also like I get asked.
Mm.
I've been asked a few times lately. It's like, what's your end game? Like when are you going to stop? Or I'm like, there is no end game. I think endurance is chasing what brings you joy, chasing that big life, finding what lights you up, serving others. Endurance is running a race that's that's bigger than yourself. And I'm not actually talking about running. I'm talking about running towards a purpose um, that's bigger, that's bigger than who you are. And you know, you're supposed to run without getting tired because if you're chasing something bigger than yourself, you won't get tired. You're hungry. You're in that fight. And that's yeah, we get tired, we get, knocked down, but I think we find that in weakness, we can find strength in people or Christ or other things that, you know, help us to keep going. And you know, I always think about when I lay my head down for the last time ever, like I
Mm.
hope that I ran a good race.
Mm.
Um, and so endurance is playing the long game. It's not playing small. It's yeah.
I was on a podcast the other day for someone else, and they asked me what my biggest fear was. And I had to think about it, but I think my biggest fear is getting to the end of my life, realizing, hey, I've got a couple breaths left here, and I could have done better, or I could have done more, or I could have served more, I could have loved more, or the things that I thought were important actually weren't the things that were important. And it's at that moment where you run out of time here on earth and you realize maybe you have some regret. I think that scares me so much.
Mhm.
And I think what you're saying with endurance too also could be applied to, when you're shooting for a goal, right? You almost have to aim past the target because the goal is not the end game, right? The end game is to keep going as best as you can for as long as you can. And I want to bring up actually a Bible verse. It's interesting to me that most of the guests on this podcast whether we talk about it explicitly or it's something that I know behind the scenes, are people of faith. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's really hard to have endurance without faith, because without some kind of faith in something bigger than ourselves, it can be easy to stop. Why keep going if there's no bigger reason? And so the verse is Romans 5, 3-5. And it goes, not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. And
Yes.
right. And it's like, and even if you're not a person of faith listening to this, I hope that you can still take that general concept of suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, and character produces hope. I think there's so much truth there.
No, I completely agree. Like that is spot on. And that endurance, like couldn't be said any better, that it does produce who you are as a person. And that endurance shapes your life and the character that you are and the things that you pursue. And yeah, and that hope is that big life. Like, and that hope is bigger than you. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, to take this to a really practical place, because again, I can't help myself. You're very experienced and seasoned as a marathon runner. Have there been moments in time throughout any of the, let's say, 15 marathons you've done so far where you've given up midway through a race?
Well, okay. No. So I had an injury at
Mm.
one point where I knew I was going to drop out at mile 13, but the whole premise was I had a friend running his first marathon, and I said, I will pace you for the first 13 miles, and then I have to play it smart. I need to drop out. So that was the only time I've ever like I don't want to say
No, you didn't
I'm
give
not
up.
officially DNF, but no, like even so, the crazy story is at Boston this year when I ran my PR, my foot was asleep for like, I don't know, 6 miles. And then I got a calf cramp, and then all of these different things kept happening. And I'm just like, well, it's the Boston Marathon. What are you going to do? Stop? No, you're not going to stop. Like, just keep going. Like, and eventually, those little aches and pains, if you've ran long enough, you always know that they kind of go away. And you're like, kind of like, oh, well, my calf doesn't hurt. Well, my hamstring's a little tight now, but my calf doesn't hurt anymore. So let's take this as a win. But I think that's kind of the beauty of like running a marathon, is like your mind goes to all these different places. But if you can kind of play whack-a-mole a little
Mm.
bit and just say, all right, is this real pain or is this perceived pain? Do I need to actually stop? Okay, well, can I run through this? All right, well, how long can I run through this? Well, it doesn't really matter. You still got to get to that finish line eventually. So you're just playing mind games the whole time. So if you can kind of gradually talk yourself off the ledge for 26 miles, you'll get to the finish line. And that's all about the journey. Like,
Mm.
that's embracing the journey, and just say, I think when you go out there and you say, I'm just going to go have fun today. Like when you get that calf cramp, or you get, a tight hamstring, or you drop your fuel source or miss a water stop or whatever it may be, you just kind of like, oh, well, this is going to get interesting. Like, let's see how it shakes up. Um, and it's always like a learning experience. That's why I say, like, if you ran one marathon, you have no clue. Like, the marathon, each time you run it, it teaches you something different.
Mm.
And whether you want to learn it or not, it's gonna throw something at you. So it's control the controllables. Like,
Mm.
what can you control that day or in that mile, or um, what you're facing. So I always say, be in the mile you're in.
Mm.
And one of the games that I play while I'm running a marathon is, I will pretend I have certain friends that I run with throughout marathon training, and I'll be like, okay, I'm running this mile with Maria. And what story would Maria tell me right now? And then I'll maybe run a mile with my grandma and just hear her yabber for like an entire mile. But it's like this game you can play, like where you just kind of get lost in the mile you're in, and you can control what you can control, and you just enjoy the ride and get there eventually.
Mm. So you get there eventually, most of the time stopping at 26.2, but there was one time you went well beyond 26.2. Can you tell us about that race?
Yeah, and I'm gonna go back there in March. Well, to the Ultra World. That's my next adventure. I haven't really told many people this, but I want to explore the Ultra World because I think there's something magical about going places that you've never been before that make you feel uncomfortable. Kind of like we talked about before. But yeah, so in COVID, the only races that were going, like ultra runners just don't care. And so they had still had ultra races. And so I signed up for this race. And I just remember crossing over the 26-mile mark. And I'm like, all right, welcome to the land of the unknown. Let's see what happens. Um, but it was kind of funny because like after that, you just didn't really care anymore. Like it was like, all right, well, I'm here. What am I gonna do? Normally you're pretty high off endorphins because running is the best drug you can get. And you just go with it and enjoy just being in it. Yeah, it hurts. Like random things happen. I won't go into details, but you can just imagine. And you just kind of roll with it and just say, okay, well, control what you can control, enjoy the day. And yeah,
How long was that race?
that was a 50K.
Okay, 50K, so a little over 31 miles.
Yeah, yeah, something around there. And I'm doing a 50 miler in March. So that'll be a new adventure.
Now, is this in place of the marathons or is this just in addition to the marathons?
Well, I pushed off Austin for the last 2 years. So I'm running Austin in February, and then I'm running a 50 miler in March, and then I'm running Boston in April. So next year is stacked. And I'm really excited about it because it's just like, I keep saying like chase what brings you joy, but like just seeing what you're capable of and like constantly pushing that envelope brings me a lot of joy because I keep finding out what I'm made of. And I think we sell ourselves short so much because you never know what that, like they say, level up.
Mm.
Well, you never know what that next level is until you kind of get there and you're like, well, okay, well, I'm here. It's like, where else can I go? What else can I do? And I think we just sell ourselves short. And I think we're conditioned as a culture to like find things that are comfortable and not chase that hard thing. And you know hard is where like the adventure lies. That's where the beauty lies. That's where, for me, I think life starts. It's like as soon as you can get to that hard, um you know there's a whole world, like places that you can take your body, your mind, and it's very freeing once you get there because you just kind of, anytime I'm in like the thick of it in a marathon and you're just kind of like taking your mind to a new place, you just, when you can let go and just feel free and know that like, I think there's just like this calm and this peace that kind of come over in those miles where it's almost like a bliss state of just enjoying where you are and knowing that you get to do this.
Mm.
And so like you put in the training, you put in all the hard work, and it's a fun ride, and then you go and sign up for another one.
It's like when I run my 800 repeats on the track during training, it sucks. And then you
Yeah.
get to the end of the rep and you recover just enough to forget just enough how much it
Yeah.
hurt to do another one. Yeah. So I've got a quote and then a quick
Okay.
story. So the quote is from William James, who said, "Most people never run far enough on their first wind to find out that they've got a second." Um,
Or third.
or fourth, right?
Yeah.
And the story is back in October of 2021, you, me, Tony Reyes, and a bunch of other of the BPN crew were on a bus coming back from, I believe, was it Lake Travis, right?
Yes.
Just jamming out to Notorious B.I.G. on the
Oh, I
bus.
loved it.
Great times. Tony was episode 4 of the podcast. Incredible conversation, amazing human. And he introduced me to the phrase, comfort is a slow death. And I think exactly what you said is so true is when we're uncomfortable, when we seek discomfort and we get to that place, that's where life begins, really.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that adventure. That was one of the best weekends of my life because it was like you walked into a room and you were surrounded by so many people that were on the same page and like-minded, and it was just like these are my people, and just being around you and being around Tony and Nick and the whole team, it was just absolutely incredible. And you know, I just can't wait.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Well, let's do this, Casey. As we begin to close things down here, I've got one final question. And as you answer this question, just know that you are in the ears of many individuals. Somebody might be driving in a car, somebody might be folding laundry, somebody might be on a run, even, or doing a workout. But some of these people, as we all do, experience tough seasons of life. And I want to hear what you would have to say to somebody who right now is in a really tough season of life, maybe going through some darkness, something heavy, and they're just not sure what to do or where to go. What would you say to that person?
I would say keep going. It There's always a light, it always gets better, but sometimes you just have to be in the thick of it. Um, Try to find peace and calm in that moment, but keep going. Keep putting one foot in front of the other, doing the next thing. Small, just take one step, and just know that you will come out of it. Like there is always a light. There is always, even when one chapter closes, it's always going to lead you to something bigger. And I think when you can learn and you journal and you can kind of see situations in your life as points to grow or points to learn, the next time you're faced with the same challenge, you'll look at it a little bit differently. Like, oh, well, I handled this situation. I'll be okay. I know I can do this. And this situation is preparing me for something bigger that I have to chase or handle in the future. And if I can just take the next step, do one thing, then I will come out of this and I will have this to stand on. And I think that's that grit of, just to keep going.
Yeah, I couldn't say it any better myself. And I know that resonated with somebody out there listening. It resonates with me. And it's a message that I think we all need to hear from time to time. And so, Casey, if people want to follow along with your journey, if they want to watch your races, if they want to connect with you, if they just want to learn more about you, where should they go to do that?
So you can find me on Instagram at Casey Cline _. Um, so that's probably the easiest way to reach me. You shoot me a DM, I will respond. I'm pretty much an open book, so running questions or I share a lot, but hopefully all insightful. I call my Instagram posts like probably journal entries or dear diary, dear Instagram.
Those
But
are the best kind. And for anybody listening with your phone in hand, go over to Instagram now and send Casey a message. You won't regret it. She's a person you want in your life. So, Casey, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for your friendship and for everything that you do. I can't wait to see where running takes you and where life takes you.
thank you, Joe. This has been super rewarding, and you're an amazing host and an amazing friend. So I value a lot.
Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.